Next we're going to look at Jesus rebuilds Israel. And he's coming to planet Earth eager to stop the way we've been living, to stop the way the world has been progressing, to stop the destruction of planet Earth. A couple of verses say that Jesus destroys those who are destroying the earth. And we have nuclear weapons if and when the nuclear weapons are detonated. Nobody knows how climate change is going to be impacted by nuclear weapons. But you can pretty much guarantee it's not going to be good, right? Israel gets destroyed 3.5 years before Jesus returns to planet Earth, when his feet touch down on planet Earth. This is got to be one of the most exciting moments in future history, when Jesus comes riding a white horse out of the sky. Horses, that's like a military parade, isn't it? Okay, and he stops at the clouds, and he sends his angels out around the earth to bring the resurrected saints out of their graves and up to the clouds to meet Jesus. Okay, most people presume that Jesus then turns around and takes all of his saints back to heaven, right? But Scripture, Zechariah says, that day his feet will land on the Mount of Olives. So he's come in the sky, he's waited and had a meeting in the clouds, then he descends to, Jesus is going to touch planet Earth, and when his feet touch it, the Mount of Olives splits in half. Yeah, it's not just an earthquake that crumbles the mountain, he's split like he takes a chainsaw, and he cuts all the way through the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives moves north and south by a large amount of space, right? Wow, he's remodeled Jerusalem, right? Harry and I, and some of you have been to Jerusalem. We've stood on the Mount of Olives. We've stood on the Temple Mount, right? To picture the Mount of Olives divided in two and spread north and south is like, this is like an earthquake nobody has ever dreamed about. But Jesus is preparing to rebuild Jerusalem as the great capital city, holy city, worship center for all of planet Earth for 1,000 years plus another 100 after that. So his feet will touch on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. The Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. Half of the mountain shall move towards the north and half towards the south. So now you're going to say, well, I'm here now. Where's the Mount of Olives? Oh, it's there and it's there. It's way off up there and it's way off down there. Oh, and what's this very large valley? Why is Jesus building a very large valley when he comes to earth and sets up his capital city? Ezekiel was given a vision of the rebuilt Jerusalem, Ezekiel 47:1. And he brought me to the back door of the temple, and there was water flowing from under the threshold of the temple towards the east, for the front of the temple faced east. Okay, I don't know how much you know of your Jerusalem geography, but if water flows from Jerusalem and the Mount of Olives, and it flows east, where's it going? You sure?
It goes towards the Mount of Olives.
No? Okay. Here's towards the Dead Sea. Because, okay, here's Jerusalem. North is this way. East is this way. Right? So, going east out of Jerusalem is towards the Dead Sea. Right? So, he plans to change the Dead Sea too. Right? So, as the river, let's see, it was a river that I could not cross. The water was too deep. The water is in which one must swim. A river that could not be crossed. Along the bank of the river were very many trees on one side and on the other. So, now he's seeing a huge river with trees on both sides of the river. Okay, what's God telling him? Then he said, this water flows towards the eastern region of the valley and enters the sea. And that's the Dead Sea. And Gary, did you ever float in the Dead Sea? Did you do that?
I waded in it.
Okay.
I had to.
When I was there, they had people with newspapers floating on their backs reading the newspaper because the salt content of the Dead Sea is so thick you don't sink in it. So, it's amazing. But that's a lot of salt. But anyhow.
Salt to put thick on that edge.
Yeah. Very, very salty, and there's no life in it. The salt is so strong, so powerful, nothing can live in the Dead Sea, right? Except people reading newspapers, and they don't stay for very long. Right? And okay, so very many trees. Then he said, wherever the water reaches, the waters are healed. The Dead Sea waters need to be healed. There's no life in the Dead Sea waters, right? And it shall be that every living thing that moves, wherever will live, and there will be very great multitude of fish. What are fish good for? Some of you people really know. Eating. That's right. Fish are good for eating. Now, there are a lot of people on planet Earth today who need to eat better than they're eating now. So there's going to be very great multitude of fish. If you like fishing, you're going to like this new world, right? Because the waters are there, and the waters will be healed, and everything will live wherever this river goes. So this sounds pretty exciting, right? So when Jesus' feet touch the Mount of Olives and he makes a very great valley, and the waters flow east and west, right? We only talked about flowing east towards the Dead Sea, but everything going eastward from Jerusalem is going to, and there's desert there, there's a lot of desert, it's going to bloom and blossom, and there's going to be many fish, and the Dead Sea is going to be changed to a living body of water. So, verse 47:12, along the bank of the river. Now, does this river in Ezekiel sound anything like you've read anywhere else in the Bible? Does it sound familiar?
Kind of like the Garden of Eden.
It's kind of like the Garden of Eden, okay. What about in the book of Revelation? Is there a description in the book of Revelation about trees on both sides of the river? Right? So it's like Ezekiel is having a view of the future after Jesus puts his feet on the Mount of Olives and makes the very great valley through which the river will flow. Right? So along the bank of the river on this side and that will grow all kinds of trees used for food. Their leaves will not wither. You won't have to rake up the leaves, right? Which is good, because their fruit will not fail. They will bear fruit every month. Can you imagine a tree that had leaves dropping every month? Wouldn't that drive you nutty? Right? Okay, because their waters flow in the sanctuary in the Mount of Olives area there. Their fruit will be good for food and their leaves good for medicine. There's sick people can be healed. The fruit, the 12 different kinds of fruit, different every month, right? For the healing of people and healing of nature and feeding of people. Verse 13, thus says the Lord God, these are the borders by which you shall divide the land as an inheritance amongst the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph will have 2 portions. So he's coming back. This was a view for Ezekiel to tell them that he is going to remake Jerusalem, Mount of Olives, the nation, after, he doesn't say in Ezekiel, but after it's been destroyed, because he said that in Luke. Israel will cease to exist as a nation for 3.5 years during the tribulation, and then burst into life under her new King of Kings, Jesus. So he's coming back, and the world is going to, the trees are going to sing. It's going to be an unbelievable way for human beings to live. No more war, no more crime, just unbelievable. So it's a time to look forward to, but he's warned us there's going to be horrible times until his feet touch on the Mount of Olives. Jesus foretold this fabulous new nation of Israel in Ezekiel, and also in the book of Revelation, Revelation 22, verse 1, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, crystal clear, proceeding from the throne of God and the Lamb. And in the midst of the street, and on either side of the river, was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. If there's ever going to be a time for the healing of nations, it's going to be after the tribulation. In fact, it'd be good now to have healings of the nations right now, wouldn't it? But you know, trumpet 6 kills a third of mankind. Trumpet 5 kills a whole bunch of people. Trumpet 4 kills a whole bunch of people. So there's going to be a lot of people dying. And even to this day, people are dying of war, and they're dying of hunger. The North Koreans, you know, they're starving. Venezuela? The Venezuelan people are stopping the garbage trucks to try and get food out of the back of the garbage trucks to stay alive, and the average Venezuelan's lost 20 pounds in weight. So after the Battle of Armageddon, which ends the tribulation, Jesus commands all nations to send people to the Feast of Tabernacles to worship Israel's new king, Jesus. Right? Because the whole new world, with all of this fabulous blessing, is based on worshipping the true God and his Son, Jesus Christ. Right? In Zechariah 14:11, the people shall dwell in it, and no longer will there be utter destruction, which will happen during before the tribulation. But Jerusalem will be safely inhabited into the future. It shall come to pass that everyone who is left of all the nations that came against Jerusalem, that's the Battle of Armageddon, shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, at the Feast of Tabernacles. So not only do we get a new world, not only do we get a river of life, not only do we get massive multitudes of fish to feed people and keep them healthy, right? We're having a new religious worship system which has existed for a long time. It's just nobody wants to do it, right? We've got a handful of people keeping the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be, verse 17, that whichever of the families of the earth do not come up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, on them shall be no rain. Verse 19, this shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So there is a huge difference between the fake Christ that sits in the temple, shows that himself that he is God, and threatens to kill you if you don't take the mark of the beast and worship the image of the beast and fall in line with his military crippling kind of worship system, right? And the Jesus who says, okay, I'm telling you, you need to come to the Feast of Tabernacles, but since you decide not to come, then your punishment's going to be no rain. And you're just going to have to suffer a year with no rain. And during that year when you're suffering and struggling to find food, you might think, well, next year when it comes Feast of Tabernacles time, we're going to send some ambassadors to the Feast of Tabernacles so we can have rain for the next year and grow crops and so on. So Jesus is beside himself with joy over his plans to rebuild Israel after it's totally destroyed. It didn't exist up until 1948. Then it was created after World War II, and now it's been struggling to stay alive all of this time. And now they look out in the morning. When the ladies go to their kitchen windows in the morning, they know there's 150,000 missiles out there beyond their borders, pointed at their little tiny stretch of land, threatening the total destruction, right, which God is not going to let it happen through rockets. It's going to happen another different way, and we already read in Luke how that's going to happen. Jesus is beside himself with joy over the plans to rebuild Israel and all nations. Isaiah 52:8, your watchmen shall lift up their voices. With their voices they shall sing together. For they shall see with eye to eye when the Lord brings back Zion, brings back Israel, brings back the new capital city, superpower nation of the world for 1,000 years, Israel, not Washington, D.C., right? So by then the swamp will be totally drained, right? And we switch over to a totally different world. Verse 9 of Isaiah 52, break forth into joy, sing together, your waste places of Jerusalem. The Lord has comforted his people and has redeemed Israel. God's dream world begins with rebuilding Jerusalem and Israel. God is going to heal planet Earth after the devastation of World War III and the tribulation period. And, you know, most of us didn't experience World War II, but you still talk to people and you can still see newsreels and things, of what happened in World War II. And to this time, that's been the worst time of tribulation on planet Earth. That Jesus says there's a worse one coming. The greatest time of tribulation is coming. Isaiah 65:18. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. So God has laid out what he will allow to happen. He allowed Hitler to start World War II. But in his thinking, he was not going to allow Hitler to win. And so things developed, miracles occurred where Hitler's people had failure after failure after failure, even though they had success after success after success. But, eventually England held its ground, America joined in, D-Day, which was celebrated, not too long ago, and a lot of people paid the price, but God pretty much said, I'm going to collude with America to win this war. And Hitler was put down. But Hitler is an abominable desolator person. Only he never claimed to be Christ. So now you're going to have a Hitler-type beast on steroids who claims to be Jesus. And the masses around the world who will say, Jesus, it's so good to see you. Or others who will say, what's it there? You kill me, I worship you, or you kill me. That's the choice? Yeah. Which do you want? What are most people going to say? Hey, what do I do to worship? Right, and they'll join in. But Jesus has fabulous plans to rebuild the chaos once it's all passed. So Israel and Jerusalem will be rebuilt into the capital city for all nations, and also the worship center for all